mute yourselves if you're not talking. With that also, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our, I can't say new executive director because she's been with us for more than 1 year now, but I invited Dr. Jan Engel, ACPE's executive director, to say a few words, because this was a good opportunity. We have many of our schools who have certified programs, or those who are in the application process. Many of them are on the webinar today, so I just invited Jan to say a few words and to introduce herself, and so that you can also get to know her. So Jan, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I want to bring you greetings from Chicago and from all of our staff at ACPE. This is a very unusual opportunity for me. While I've met some of you one-on-one or when we're at your school, this is the first time where we've had a variety of people from a variety of schools together where I've had the opportunity to interact. So I'm just happy to see all of you participating in this webinar, and I want to add my welcome to all of you. We're happy to see so much participation. We really do value our relationship with all of you, and we do hope that you'll find this webinar helpful. I just want to reiterate that we are here to answer any questions that you may have, and we do look forward to many more years of working together to achieve our goal of advancing pharmacy education and improving patient care worldwide. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you very much, Jan. So we have two purposes to introducing this webinar for you today. Many of you will know, those of you who are probably deans of certified programs, this year we will be introducing for the first time our annual reporting requirement, whereby schools with certified programs will be required to report on their faculty resources, their academic staff resources, as well as their enrollment trends over the past few years. So this opportunity to explain a little bit of a complicated form is really what stimulated our annual reporting, is what stimulated this call today. But this document, the faculty resource report, the spreadsheet, is something that is required when schools do their self-study reports. If they have an interim report as part of their ongoing monitoring, we require them to submit the form, and if they have a focus visit as well, we require them. So it is a form that is used fairly frequently. Some of you may have attempted in the past to fill it in, some successfully, some with a little bit more of a challenge. It is a slightly unusual form, so it takes some getting used to. But I don't anticipate that this webinar will take too long to explain, and just slowly work through the form with you so that you can understand. If you have just joined, welcome. We have now about 42 participants in our webinar, so I think virtually everyone who's registered has now joined the call. So I will just mention that the webinar is being recorded and will be available to you afterwards. But also, if you do have any questions at any stage, please type it into the chat box or raise your hand. Sylvie Castrati, our international coordinator, will be monitoring the chat box. And if you have questions, please just type it into the chat box, and we'll stop. Sylvie will stop me, and we'll explain what's going on. So this document is available on our website. If you have any difficulty downloading it from our website, please contact me or Sylvie, and we'll send a copy. You'll notice right at the very top here that this version dates back to August 2013. It is a protected spreadsheet in that you cannot access and change all of the cells in the worksheet. But today I'm actually working with an unprotected worksheet, so we can show you everything, all the functionality of the spreadsheet. We will actually be uploading to the website a new version. It'll be basically the same, but some of the cells we will actually be unprotecting so that you can actually enter into data into those cells. So we'll explain that as we go through. So what we're going to do on the webinar today is I'm just going to walk through and complete a blank faculty resource report and show you how to do that, and we'll make some explanations as we go. So I'm going to start at basically at the top and then give you the some instructions, just explain some of those instructions a little bit more detail, and then we will move down into the spreadsheet itself, and we'll start filling in this complicated, colorful section in the spreadsheet itself. So first of all, what we'd like you to do is in this box, in this cell at the top here, when you complete the form after you've downloaded it from the website, please just enter the name of your university, college, or school of pharmacy. And if applicable, if you have multiple campuses, multiple locations, please put in the campus location here. If you do have 2 or more campuses where you have a significant number of academic staff, please complete one form for each campus. So this would be where you would put the name of the School of Pharmacy and the campus name, and again, fill in a completely separate form if you have multiple campuses with significant numbers of academic staff at each. Probably the aspect of this spreadsheet that causes most confusion is the concept of positions or people, and we'll explain this in detail in a moment. But please, it's important that you understand that the spreadsheet contains 2 different concepts. The first is the concept of positions, approved positions, which your university has approved and allows people to be hired into those positions. The second aspect is the people. So these are human beings, and you'll be counting those as well. So you'll be counting positions that your university has authorized, has approved for the College of Pharmacy or the School of Pharmacy to hire people into those positions, but it might mean that that position might not yet be filled with an actual person. So please think of it as we have this webinar today, think of it about positions and people. We'll be repeating this theme as we go. So first of all, here we talk about the different terms that are going to be used in the spreadsheet. We talk about filled positions, vacant positions, hires, resignations, retirements, other losses. And these are shown as pale blue cells in the workshop. So all these pale blue-green cells are actual people, where we're going to be actually counting people. In yellow, these yellow cells are the positions that have been authorized by the university for the School of Pharmacy. They've said you are allowed to have 30 faculty members. You may only have 25 in place, people in place, but you're authorized to have 30 positions. So those are the yellow cells, positions. The blue cells are actual people, actual human beings. Okay. So what we would like you to do is to include part-time and full-time people, but we would suggest that if you have some part-time people that are employed at the school at a very low level, like 0.25 or 1/4 full-time equivalent, we would suggest that you don't try to cater for those people, otherwise your spreadsheet gets very complicated. As it is, if you're dealing with fractions of a person or not full-time, so 0.5 FTE or 0.75 FTE, it does get really complicated. I must be honest with you, it's a lot easier if you can work with full-time equivalent. So just single digits, 1s, 2, 3. But if you start working with 3.5, 3.75, it does get a little bit complicated. If you choose to allocate only your full-time staff, in other words, those that have a 1 FTE, it makes it a lot simpler to complete it. But if you choose to do that only, and you are excluding from the table, from the spreadsheet, a certain number of part-time faculty members or academic staff, just explain that to us. So we don't really mind how you do it, provided you give us a good explanation of how you have completed the form. As I say, recognizing that it gets a little bit complicated if you're working with part-time staff or trying to split someone's effort between maybe administration and a practice department, a scientific department. If you want to say the dean works 0.5 of his or her effort in administration and 0.5 or half of his or her effort in one of the departments, it does start to get a little bit complicated. So as I say, choose how you would like, how it's easiest for you to fill out the form, and just explain to us how you've done that so we understand. What I would also like to mention at this point is that when you do a self-study, the faculty resource report is just one of the different templates that you will be completing for ACPE. And it's important that all the different templates that describe different makeup of your staff. For example, we might ask how many of your academic staff have PhDs, how many have masters, how many have PharmDs, how many have bachelors. We want the totals of these different forms to be virtually identical. So for example, I mentioned the figure of 30 earlier on. If we see 30, a total of 30 in one form, we don't want to see 21 or 35 or 38 in another form. Maybe one or two people can be a little bit different just because of what I've just explained in terms of how you fill in the form, but all those forms should be consistent in terms of their total number of staff. So again, how you choose to do this is up to you, but just explain it to us. But in this point here, we would request that you only include staff that are a minimum of half full-time equivalent. So if they're working essentially half-time or more at the College of Pharmacy, please include them. So I've already mentioned also, if the program is offered over multiple campuses, please complete a separate form for each branch or campus. The cells that are in gray, all these cells here that are in gray, all have formulas in which you will not be able to change those formulas. Most of those are just additions, adding up columns, adding up rows. Those have formulas which you will not be able to enter. So you will only be entering numbers into the yellow and blue squares. So yellow positions, blue cells, actual human beings. You will only enter numbers into those cells. The gray ones you will not be able to enter. Text in red can or should be re-entered as applicable. So for example, I mentioned the name, and here we want your department name: pharmaceutical sciences, pharmacy practice. These cells here that I'm showing you now, you can access and change those cells. So change it according to the name of your departments. You will notice here that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 departments. If you have 5 departments at your school, 5 or more, this form does not cater for that. We can send you a separate version, a new version. Do not try to, you will not be able to add departments to this form. That gets really complicated again if you try to do that. But if you do require a spreadsheet with more departments than what is catered for on this form, the 4 that are catered for, just let us know and we will send you a version of the spreadsheet that has caters for 5 different departments. So again, please here add the actual name in red here, add the actual name of the various departments that you have. One thing I will also mention is here in terms of the academic year, here we are assuming a July to June academic year. If that is not your academic year, Please, in this cell here, closing figure June, opening figure July, please, in the past, these cells have been protected. We will be unprotecting these cells. So you can also enter in here. We'll probably put this text in red here so that you can actually change it as well. So if these dates do not actually apply to you, you can put in your own dates if you have a different academic year. Again, just so that we can understand what numbers and what dates you're referring to. So what you'll also notice here is that the closing figure here for 1 year, this will become apparent when we start working through it. The closing figure here is automatically carried forward to the next academic year. So here we have the past academic year, 2018-19, for example, and this figure here, the closing figure, will automatically be carried forward to the opening figure. So all these figures here, down at the bottom, your number of approved positions, your number of filled positions, your number of vacant positions will automatically be carried forward to the next year. So these figures down here at the bottom, the closing figures for the current academic year, will automatically be transferred. So these figures you will not have to worry about. It's all calculated in the spreadsheet. Okay. What we've also mentioned here in the notes is this is not an exact. We realize that, that everything is somewhat fluid, somewhat dynamic at a school of pharmacy. There's movement throughout the year. People do not necessarily be hired or retired or resign exactly in line with your academic year. Hopefully, that happens quite frequently. It makes it easier to complete the form. But obviously, things happen throughout the year. If you had a position, let's say a retirement, and someone was at the School of Pharmacy for most of the year, but then did retire maybe with 1 month to go before the end of the academic year, if you want to just leave that position as if it did not happen in that year, because basically most of the year that person was there, and by inserting a number 1 to say that they retired or resigned during the year, it might give a little bit of a misleading impression. So if you want to, you can carry forward that activity to the next year. If the year, as I say, is so close to being completed, you can say that as from the beginning of the next year, that person retired or resigned. So use your discretion. Again, please just explain what you've done. Send us some explanatory notes if something unusual has happened. Just send us an explanation when you do that. What we do see sometimes is that we end up with negative figures in the spreadsheet. So for example, in the vacant positions, we end up with a minus number. A minus number would be something very unusual. So please, if you ever end up with a minus number in this column, the vacant positions column, please look at your numbers again very, very carefully to ensure that that it is correct. So a minus vacant position would be an unusual situation. It's not impossible, but it does mean that you have more human beings, more people than you have authorized positions. So maybe the university says you can have 6 people in your pharmaceutical sciences department, but you actually have 7 people hired and working. So that means you have more people than the positions are authorized. So you have technically a negative vacancy or a surplus of people above and beyond what you're authorized to have. I'm not saying it's impossible, it is possible. So if it does happen, just explain to us again to say, yes, this is correct. We have more people in place. It's a temporary situation, but we do have more people in place than is actually authorized at this time. But typically it's a mistake, so check those figures carefully. Okay. And I've already mentioned this, if the departmental titles don't reflect your structure, You can change the titles here, like pharmaceutical sciences. If that's not the name, change it. And again, if the form does not accommodate your departmental structure, if you need more than 4 departments, just let us know and we will send you a new version. Okay, that being said, we'll now move on and start trying to fill in this spreadsheet. These cells at the top here, past academic year, current academic year, next academic year, if you've used this form before, you would have noticed that you cannot change anything in those forms. So what we've actually now done is we've unprotected these cells so that you can actually type in information into these. So what we would like you to do, please, when you are filling in your faculty resource report, we would like you to put in the date. So you could put, you know, academic year 2018-19, or you could say July 2018 to June 2019. You can put whatever your academic year is. So these cells will now be unprotected and available to you to actually fill in what year we're talking about. Okay. So this is the position here. You will start filling in the form with your past academic year. So this is historical information. So from 2018 to 2019 academic year, for example, in this to show you today, you will start with historical information for which you actually should have all of the information. So you would have known exactly what was happening. So let's take this example of pharmaceutical sciences. So on July 1, 2018, the university authorized us to have 15 faculty members in that department, pharmaceutical sciences. And you'll see here that those figures of 15 are automatically carried through throughout the spreadsheet. So while if nothing else changes, that figure carries forward throughout the spreadsheet. The next cell that you're going to fill in is to say how many positions were actually filled. So let's say, for example, at that stage, 1st of July 2018, we were authorized to employ 14 people. We had 15 people, sorry. We had 14 who were actually at the College of Pharmacy. And at that point, we had 1 vacancy in our pharmaceutical sciences department. The next thing we're going to do is to say that year, what changed? Through the course of the academic year, what changed? So maybe the university authorized you to increase the size of your faculty science, pharmaceutical sciences department by 1 person. So 1 new position was authorized by the university president. So you'll see now, once we enter 1 in this cell, our numbers go up to 16 approved or authorized positions in pharmaceutical sciences. Again, if nothing else changes, it would then create 1 extra vacancy. So we would then have 2 vacancies if nothing else happens. If a position was discontinued, obviously that is a little bit more rare, more unusual, but it's possible that the university might say, sorry, because of financial constraints, we've had to reduce the number of people in your department, or maybe we're going to reduce pharmaceutical sciences, but we're going to allow you to recruit more people into pharmaceutical sciences. So this is possible, but obviously a little bit unusual. So if we typed in a number here, if we typed in here, number 1, it would reduce again from 16 down to 15. So let's assume that during the course of the year, we actually managed to hire 2 people. So 2 people were hired into pharmaceutical sciences and came to the school. So if nothing else changed, you can now see that our vacancies have automatically gone down to 0. But what happens, maybe we also had 1 resignation. So we type in 1 resignation during the year, and you'll see that we then have 1 vacancy here at the end of the year. So let's assume that that was everything that happened. So we had, during the course of the year, 1 new position approved. We hired 2 people. but one person also resigned. So we ended up the year with 16 authorized or approved positions, 15 human beings, 15 academic staff actually in place, and one position vacant. And you'll see that those figures have carried forward to the next academic year, which is our current year, or the year perhaps that's just immediately finished, okay, if we've already just started a new year. Okay, so 16, 15, 1, what happened this year? Well, no new positions were authorized. We did manage to hire into that vacant position. And so at the end of the current academic year, we had 16 faculty members, no vacancies. Again, here, please remember that sometimes you're going to be predicting what's actually going to happen. Usually for the current academic year, most of that information is known, but if perhaps it's early in the academic year, if the current academic year, you're still early in the year, you might still have to do some projections for what's going to happen. Again, if you're making projections, if you're not reporting historical information, just let us know, just explain what's happening. Once we get to the next academic year, these are projections. Now, again, you don't know exactly what's going to happen in terms of particularly hiring or firing or resignations or whatever. You don't know exactly. So these are going to be projections to the best of your ability. So let's assume again that the university is going to expand your pharmaceutical sciences department by adding one extra person, and you will see that you now have 17 positions authorized. But for example, you know that next year, 2 of your professors are going to be retiring. Okay, so you have 1 new position authorized, but you anticipate that next year, or you know that next year, 2 people are going to be retiring. So you can put that figure in as a projection, but you're going to actively recruit. And let's assume that you are confident that you're going to be able to fill 2 of those positions, or maybe you're confident you're going to fill 3. Whatever you feel confident is going to happen during the year, you're going to fill in that figure. And you will see that at the end of the year, we would perhaps have 1 vacancy open. But let's assume for illustration purposes that you assume that all your vacant positions are going to be, you're going to be able to successfully hire into all of those positions, and you would end up the end of the year with no vacancies in your pharmaceutical sciences department. So that's essentially how you do it. As I say, this is going to be historical information for the past academic year, what actually happened, those numbers you actually know. And you'll see here that each of these cells have an explanation in them to show what's the impact of these cells and these formulas. So there's some explanations there. Those closing figures for the past academic year automatically transferred. For the current academic year, hopefully those are going to be reasonably accurate based on what's actually happened in the current year. If you're early in the academic year, you may have to make some projections. And then finally, the next academic year is completely the projections. You just give it as accurately as you think you can. We understand that these are projections and they might or might not happen. So this is essentially what you will do for each department. You'll go through the same process. For each department, you're going to start here. So pharmacy practice, we have 12 authorized positions. We started the year with 11. We started the year with 1 vacancy. The university said you can recruit because we want to expand pharmacy practice. So we add 2 there. So we go from 12 to 14 authorized positions. And again, let's say we anticipate that we're going to be able to hire into all of those, or we did, sorry, this is historical information. We did hire all of those positions, and it again means that we ended up the year with no vacancies. If we actually hired 4 people, we would have a situation where we have 14 authorized positions 14 approved positions, but we actually have 15 faculty members actually in that department. So we end up with a scenario of -1. So that means we're overstocked. We have more people than positions. So that would result in a negative number. Again, if you get a negative number, check carefully that your figures are accurate. It's not impossible, but it does mean that your pharmacy practice department has more people, more human beings than positions that are authorized. Again, if that ever happens, please explain to us that, yes, this is correct. We've got a temporary situation. We have a faculty member on loan or on sabbatical from another university, and they're just working with us temporarily for the year. They're not going to be there forever. That's just a temporary situation. So if you had that scenario, for example, let's assume that that was the scenario. What was, the other number of persons lost for another reason? Well, if we had that situation where someone came on sabbatical from another university for a year, but within the current academic year they left, we would put that in there to say number of persons who were lost for other reasons. So death or transfer or a temporary position left or whatever, you would put that in that row over here. So that would bring your situation back to normal. You reducing the number of people by 1 because that person who was on sabbatical temporarily left, and that restored the normal situation. So again, that's how it works. If you go again to next year, let's say the university is going to allow us to have 1 more position next year. So we go from 14 to 15, and we anticipate that we're going to be able to hire that. But we also know that we might lose 1 person by resignation. And so you would just put in your projections here and you say, we anticipate that at the end of the year, we might have 1 vacancy. So you will repeat basically this process for each of your departments, 3, 4. Here, this department doesn't have a name, so you'll put in the name. So admin sciences, whatever the department is, you can put in the name there, and you will repeat the process. You will see also now that these figures are all now carried down to the total. The summary just gives us a reflection of what's happening. The final area that we're going to fill in is a little bit complicated because there is the possibility for in your administration to split positions. What I would like to clarify here is your administration is not your administrative support that you might have in the office. For example, the dean's administrative assistant. We're not talking about those people here. We're talking about academic staff, faculty members, but whose role is primarily in administration. So you're going to have probably fairly small numbers here, like 2 or 3 or 4 at very most. This would be perhaps your dean, your vice deans, that kind of thing. Again, what you're going to decide here is if your dean has certain teaching responsibilities in a department, you can split the dean's full-time equivalent effort. So let's assume that we have 1 dean and 1 vice dean, and each of them spend half of their time in administration and half of their time in a teaching department or one of your departments. So you would allocate 0.5 of the dean to administration. The other half you would allocate to one of the departments, which might be there already. So you may end up with a situation. So let's take a scenario where you have a dean here, 1.1 full-time, and you say, even though the dean teaches in the pharmaceutical sciences department, I'm not going to ignore it because it's a fairly small part of his or her time. Again, just explain that the dean's effort has been allocated completely to administration. If you split it, just explain what you've done. So let's say we have the dean, but also that we have the Vice Dean is also in the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences. So we have 1.5, so that's the Dean, and half of the Vice Dean is allocated to Pharmaceutical Sciences. So if we go back up here to Pharmaceutical Sciences Department, we would make this figure 15.5, because we're splitting the Vice Dean's position between administration and pharmaceutical sciences. And here, for example, we would have 15.5 again. We would just say that that was filled. So this is how we started the year. So you may end up with some 0.5s in the situation. As I said, if you choose not to do that, that's fine. It's a lot easier if you're only working with whole numbers. But if you do want to split a position, just do that. But whatever you do, just explain how you've done it. And I'm going to, for the purposes of clarity, I'm just not going to bother to add in any of these figures here. So that was how you would split a position if you wanted to. I would suggest, again, don't try and start getting into 0.25s. It really gets messy and confusing, I will be honest with you. So by and large, I would suggest that you work with full numbers and just explain. If you want to put the Dean, for example, or the Vice Dean exclusively to administration, just say, please note that the Dean has some teaching responsibilities in pharmacy practice. The Vice Dean has some teaching responsibilities, but they have not been accounted for in the faculty resource report. So that's essentially how we'll do it. And as I say, all those figures are then summarized. These are all gray cells. You will not be entering any information in the summary at the end. So what are we saying? You know, by the end of next academic year, we anticipate that we're going to have 34 faculty members, and we're going to have 1.5 positions are going to be vacant. So that's pretty much, again, this is just by way of example. At any time, if you are completing the form and you have a problem, don't hesitate to send us the form, and we can have a look at it and say, you know, this looks right, this looks like there's something wrong here. Don't hesitate to submit it to us. If necessary, we can do a one-on-one Zoom call with you. And usually, if there's a problem, it doesn't take long. It might be 5 minutes or 10 minutes on a Zoom call. Let's use this technology that we have, because we can look at the same spreadsheet together on the screen, and we can just work through it with you. So if you ever have a problem, if you're confused, if you're not sure how to fill it in, don't hesitate to contact us, and we can just work through that form with you step by step. For the annual monitoring, obviously this is going to be a little bit easier because you will be doing it on a regular basis, and you will have the historic figures. You will have copies of your old faculty resource report spreadsheets, and it's going to make it a lot easier just to keep, you know, adding to that and changing those figures. So, you know, the current academic year, for example, will become the past academic year, and you will just be extending that out forward. So you'll have a historical record of how you completed the form, and obviously that needs to be consistent from one year to the next. So I think these are mainly the points that I would like to make regarding faculty positions. Hopefully it's a little bit, clearer to you now. Right down at the bottom, we just have students enrolled. Again, these are the number of students that are actually in place. We recognize that some of you may have rolling admissions. So you might admit multiple times during a year particularly into the first year of your program. So again, if that is the case, put in here the average number of students that you had in each of these years. So you had an average of 35 students in the first year, you had 31 in the second year, 28 here, 30 here, 29 here, and 27 here, your numbers. So you had 180 students in the past academic year. So a total of 180 spread over the 6 years. Obviously, if you only have a 4-year program, these are going to be zeros in here. So that would be how you would fill that in. And again, as we trend this over years, we're going to be looking for consistency for the years from one of your returns, one of your submissions to the next. Again, next academic year, you don't know what that's actually going to happen. So these will be projections. So for example, the third year here, past academic year, obviously this becomes the 4th year of the current academic year. So let's say you might assume that you might lose 2, and you've lost 2 of those students and you've gone down to 26. So this will be how that will get filled in. Again, you'll have all the totals worked out for you. So I think with that, hopefully I have explained most of what I need to explain. So let me stop talking now and ask anyone if they have any questions. Sylvie, did we get any questions?
Mike, we have not received questions in the chat box.
All right, so let's take a moment just to pause, and people can either put information. I see Dr. Nizar has raised his hand, so let's unmute Dr. Nizar.
Okay, I've unmuted myself, so
thank you.
Firstly, I would like to thank you for your full explanation of this somehow troublesome table that we have been suffering over the last couple of years to fill successfully. I would like to make my comments or question as precise as possible, so any one of the attendees could benefit from them, so we minimize the duplication. So the first one, when you were talking about the fractions or the full-time equivalents, and you said it is much better to deal with integers, the whole numbers. In our case, for example, in Jordan, we are dealing with part-timers. For example, from outside the university, from the Royal Medical Services or from the Ministry of Health, and you know they are not working fully, and the full-time equivalent is ranging, for example, from 15 points to 14 points. The 14 points is the full-time. So is it possible, for example, to add up these fractions? For example, in reality, I'm dealing with 40 people, but all of them, they are half 0.5 FTE. Is it possible to fill the table, assuming that each 2 of them is equivalent to a full-time, so I will get rid of the fractions? Is this acceptable?
It is completely acceptable. So let me make a point that maybe I didn't explain well enough at the beginning. This table is talking about full-time equivalence. So in fact, the point that you've made is completely correct. We're talking about full-time equivalence. If you have a professor who works full-time, you will have 1 full-time equivalent, and that will be equivalent to 1 human being. So I made the point earlier, perhaps incorrectly. Let me clarify, and thank you for this question because it helps me to clarify this. When I was talking about actual people, if the number of if all of those people, that all of those professors are full-time, the number of full-time equivalents is equal to the number of human beings. But if not, as in your case, if many of those are part-time, so let's say half-time, if you have 40 half-time people, part-time people, and they work at 0.5 FTE, the number that you would enter into the table would be 20. Now, I've misled everyone a little bit, because those are not 20 human beings. They are 40 human beings, but they are 20 full-time equivalent. And this table is actually technically all about full-time equivalent. So you are absolutely correct. If you have 40 part-time staff that are 0.5 each, it would be 20 full-time equivalent. If some of those, we tend to say here, include those that are a minimum of 0.5 FTE. So if you have 0.25 people, so people who are working, only a quarter of their time working in the college, we tend to suggest that you don't include them because it gets really complicated if you're dealing with very small percentages or fractions of a full-time equivalent. So that our normal recommendation is to not count people that are less than half-time. That is our recommendation. If you want to try and include everyone, you can do that. But again, just explain what you've done and we'll work it out when it comes to us. But it gets really complicated if you're starting to talk about, particularly if there's a lot of movement with your part-time people, it gets really difficult, and then you lose track of what you're doing because you have all these fractions all over the place, and you can remember, Professor Muhammad, left. Okay, that was one person, one FTE. But if you're dealing with 40 part-timers and one of them leaves, it gets really complicated, I will be honest. So that's why it's a lot simpler dealing with integers. But in your case, if your part-timers are a big part of your faculty resources, obviously you cannot ignore them. So you have to just find a relatively simple way to account for them.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much. May I ask another short question, please?
Please, of course.
Okay. So, in pharmacy schools, especially those who are having PharmD programs, you have the preceptors all over the place, whether inside the university, if you have a hospital university, and they are also spread throughout the region. So
yes.
How do you count or how do you deal with non-PhD holders? I mean, for example, teaching assistants, lecturers, preceptors, part-time preceptors, all these personnel are included when you are filling this table?
No, we would request that those who are not employed, so these would be people who are employed by the college. So they're basically the college is their main place of employment. So volunteer preceptors, we do not want you to include in this form. There are other tables or other places where you will report on your volunteer preceptors. If you have a preceptor who may be working at the hospital, is employed by the College of Pharmacy or the Faculty of Pharmacy, and maybe is employed half-time, half of their effort is at the hospital as a clinical pharmacist, for example, and half of their time is allocated for teaching in the program, you can split them 0.5 and allocate 0.5 FTE to pharmacy practice department, for example. If you have 10 preceptors who have half of their effort teaching in the faculty and half of their effort in the clinical department at the hospital, you would have 10 times 0.5, you would put 5 of them in your pharmacy practice department, for example. And then the rest of their effort would be at the hospital, but you would just explain that. So you would include 5 FTE if they're employed by the faculty, but they spend half of their time at the hospital. So 10 times 0.5, add 5 to the numbers in the pharmacy practice department, for example.
Okay.
But your volunteer preceptors do not include them in this form.
No. We don't have any voluntary work as a preceptors. Actually, the other side or the other part of the question was about the TAs, teaching assistants, in other departments. For example, the pharmaceutical sciences department or the medicinal chemistry department, and the lab technicians.
Lab technicians we would not include on this form. So this would be academic staff, and that's up to you. Typically, we would include probably at a minimum someone with a master's degree maybe as a teaching assistant or something like that. Again, just explain to us what you've done. But lab technicians are typically not regarded by us as academic staff. And there will be other places in your reporting where you will talk about those positions, laboratory technicians or that kind of thing. Maybe those are bachelor holders, those kind of things. So typically we would be looking usually at masters, PhD, PharmD holders who are going to be classified as academic staff and included here. But again, if you classify it differently, if you include them as part of your academic staff resources, if you count them, just explain that to us and say, because remember that we will have other tables that are going to correlate with this. So we've got the faculty resource, and then when you do a self-study, you will have those other tables which will explain, you know, so many professors, so many associate professors, so many assistant professors, so many, you know, lecturers. Just explain to us, because our problem is that we're obviously working with many different structures. So we cannot have a form that's very rigid in terms of saying this is how you'll do it, because it might not suit everyone's way that they classify their academic staff. So we're not very rigid. We try to be flexible, but just explain what you've done, what is included, what's not included, and all your, maybe all your teaching assistants, for example, you can say, in addition to what is reported in this faculty resource, we have 12 teaching assistants who hold bachelor's degrees, that kind of thing. Just explain to us what, you know, how all your, because really at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is find out what is the total number of resources that you have available to deliver your program.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the good questions.
Thank you.
Very good.
Mike, we have a question from Dr. Naveed. He says, where should we mention staff members who are on study leave for higher studies?
I would include them, if they're on study leave, I would include them in your numbers, include them in the faculty resource. So let's go down here, include them here, but just make a mention somewhere to say that in the pharmaceutical sciences department, we have one member who's on sabbatical in the United States or whatever. So include them in the numbers if they're, you know, fully employed but not physically present. You can include them in the numbers. Otherwise, it looks like you have a vacancy. If you take them out, it looks like you have a vacancy. So include them in the numbers, but just explain that, you know, one member is in the United States studying for a PhD or whatever it happens to be. Dr. Naveed, did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions?
Mike, we have a question from Dr. Fathia. She says, if TAs is a newly graduate, how will it be included in the form?
Again, don't worry on this form. Don't worry about, you know, how recently they have graduated. So if they're part of your academic teaching staff, include them on the form. Again, you will remember that when you're doing a self-study, we have another template that talks about how many years those people have been at the school, or how many years they've been qualified. I can't remember exactly. I think it's how many, you know, so the junior faculty, if they've just, you know, recently graduated, that will be captured in a different form. But here they will be included. This form does not differentiate if they're recent graduate or if they've been a professor for 20 years. This form does not differentiate. Other forms, other templates do differentiate based on the, you know, the number of years they've been, for example, in their academic rank. So there are other templates that cater for that. Here they're just treated like everyone else. This form does not differentiate based on when they qualified.
Mike, we have a question from Dr. Ayman. Dr. Ayman, please unmute your microphone at this time, and feel free to ask your question to Mike.
Hello.
Hello, Dr. Ayman.
Hello. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
So I have, I'm a little bit confused because you said that if you have 2 campuses, so you have to fill the form, like you have to fill a form for each campus separately.
Correct.
But the problem is that we are a one school, like one college of pharmacy, but we have a female campus and a male campus. And the male staff actually participating in teaching of the in the female campus, actually through a Blackboard. So what will be the situation? Because it looks like here, one of the campuses will not be like qualified in the number. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is again, excellent question. Thank you for raising it. Again, the form perhaps doesn't lend itself exactly to that situation. So what you would do is just have to explain in explanatory notes how that is happening. So in your situation, I would list them separately as stating, okay, here's our male campus, here's our female campus, and here's the number of faculty members on the male campus and the number of females on the female campus. So yes, probably if we were to look at that in complete isolation, we might say, oh my goodness, you have so few female academic staff relative to the number of female students you have on that campus. So again, don't try to cater for that in the form. It would get way too complicated to say, that maybe 25% of a male faculty member's time is allocated to teaching on the female campus. It would get very, very complicated to try and fill in this form. So just give it a little bit more static to say this is their primary location, fill it in on that basis, but just say that, all of the male teachers, or, 70% of the male teachers also teach to the female students via Blackboard or via Zoom or however it's done. Just explain that to us. Don't try to, apportion a certain amount of a male faculty member's teaching effort into this form. It would get way too complicated. So just describe that in text. So when the spreadsheet is filled in, feel free to supply any additional explanatory notes that you need to help it make sense for us. Otherwise, as you've said correctly, if we saw that, we would think, oh my goodness, they don't have enough resources on the female campus if we don't know that the male faculty members are also teaching there. So just explain that to us.
Okay, thank you very much. But another short question is that also regarding the students, the number of students enrolled, you are summarizing it in form of year, like we are accepting students each year. But when you deal with a semester-based system, this means that you are having each semester new students for new year, and actually you are offering the whole courses each semester. And here the story is going to be a little bit more complicated and will not reflect the real picture. But you spoke about summarizing it like an average number, but those are not going to be the same students. Like the students in the first semester are not the same student in the second semester, or what?
Yeah, again, I understand that. And again, no form is perfect. No form is completely adequate to try and deal with every single scenario. We just have to have one form that we try to interpret the best way we can. So again, please, in your situation, really what we're looking for here is the adequacy of the resources to cater for the number of students. So we're just trying to get a sense of how many students are on campus or in the program on average. So yes, it might not be the same students, but you could say on average, we have 30 students in our second year. It might vary by semester to semester. It might be 25 in the first semester, to 35 in the second, whatever. But on average, we have 30 throughout the year. Because what we're trying to get a sense of is how many students, how many faculty members, how many students, how many laboratories, how many students, how many classrooms. We're just trying to get a sense of the adequacy of the resources to manage that. So even though that might not be the same student in different semesters, just give us a sense of what is the average. And again, just explain what you're doing. Explain how you've given us those numbers. What do those numbers mean? Just explain that to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ayman.
Mike, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions in the chat box, so I would like to invite anyone who has a question to unmute their microphone and ask it out loud.
Thank you, Sylvie.
First, I'd like to thank you so much, Mike, for the very good information, very detailed talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
I
Dr.
have I have a short question. Actually, I just want to double check the fact if I get your idea like in the correct way. Talking about the administrative positions, for instance, the dean, the vice deans.
Yes.
We have 2 vice deans, for instance. I prefer, like, did I get your opinion right when you talk that I agree with you in not mentioning fractions or like digits, you know, 0.5 or since it's going to get like more complicated. You explained that we have to explain it in what, in where, in a detailed like appendix or what, in the descriptive comments, where should I clarify it? If I just want to stick to the whole academic stuff, the regular ones, mentioning the fact that back in our ones, we have to note that, for instance, the vice deans and the dean, they have academic loads or like this, right?
Yeah, so just send us a Word document and an attachment to explain an appendix, however you want to refer to it. It can be in the cover email when you submit your form. In any way, really, we don't have a
So it's better just to clarify it in any way.
Just whichever way works for you to explain. You can say, please note that all of our, administrative positions, our deans, our vice deans, all have teaching responsibilities as well. We estimate that for the vice deans, this is 0.25 or 25% of their effort is in teaching, but you can explain that we've allocated them entirely to administration. We have not allocated them to a department because it got too complicated. So, any kind of explanation is fine. We really don't mind. It's just so that when we see the figures, we can get a good sense of what's happening. Again, please be quite relaxed about this. Don't get too concerned. Provided we have an explanation, that's all we need. We're just, as I say, trying to look for matching up the number of students, particularly with the number of resources available, particularly academic resources, but also physical resources, labs, facilities, preceptors, practice sites. We're tying up all of those things. So this is really primarily what it's about. The other thing that the faculty resource report is very useful for us is looking at the stability. Are we seeing a lot of turnover? So for example, let's just move back up here to one of the departments. If we see, that we had 15 positions and we had, 7 resignations and 8 hires, a lot of movement, we would say, what's going on? Why is there so much movement, turnover of staff? So this again gives us a good picture quickly of how stable are the academic resources. Is it very stable? Are we seeing numbers like 1s and 2s and 3s? This kind of thing is quite acceptable. But if we started seeing very high numbers here, we'd say, why are we getting so many resignations and rehires? There's a lot of instability here, a lot of turnover. What's going on? And we would probably ask a question. And this, maybe this is a good point on which I can conclude in terms of our annual reporting. We do not make certification decisions or compliance decisions based on what we see in these tables. We do not say, oh, my goodness, we're going to make you non-compliant with this particular standard. No, all this does is gives us a good standardized way to look at faculty across all our programs. So we look at it in a standardized way, but it gives the possibility for us to ask a question and to say, I'm looking at your pharmaceutical sciences department and I'm noticing that you had 7 resignations and you hired 6 new people. This is quite high relative to 15 people in the department. just tell us, explain to us, what's going on here. Is there a reason for concern? If there's not, so it might lead to some additional reporting, but generally it doesn't. Generally, we'll have a look at this, we'll say everything's fine, and there's no further action. But if it maybe raises some questions in our mind, it doesn't mean that you're going to be put on, something's going to be made even compliant with monitoring. It does not necessarily mean that. It just means that there will be some kind of follow-up by us to say, please, just explain to us what's going on. This is why what I would encourage you to do is after you've filled in the table, if you say, oh, ACPE might wonder what's going on here, I think I need to add an explanation in terms of what's going on here. So feel free at any time to explain the numbers if you think, oh, this looks a little bit unusual. ACPE might think this looks a little bit unusual. Let's explain, what's going on. Was there an unusual circumstance? Whether that relates to your academic staff, or maybe it relates to your students as well. If for example, one year you had a really, here you can see on average, we're looking at about 30, but maybe one year you had 45. What happened that year? Just explain to us. Well, that year we had a lot of refugees came into our country, and the government requested us to accommodate these students in our program. Again, just explain if you think, my goodness, this looks a little bit unusual, and maybe we need to explain this to ACPE, what's going on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Good. Well, I know we've gone just a little bit beyond the hour. I hope it's been helpful. I will just emphasize again, please feel free at any time if you have questions related to completion of the form. If you'd like even a one-on-one instruction with your real data, you can say, look, here's the spreadsheet. I'm having a little bit of difficulty with it. This happens, we've done this in the past on several occasions. People have said, I'm having a little bit of difficulty. This form doesn't seem to work. Can you explain? And usually within a couple of minutes, we walk through it and we find out where the problem is, and we can fix it. So at any stage, we're available to help. If you need to contact us, if you need to send it to us and say, I'm having some problems, don't hesitate. We're here for you to help you with that. Okay, with that, I will say thank you very much for your great participation. We've had a very high number of people, somewhere between 35 and just over 40 participating, so that was excellent. Thank you very much for your participation. We hope it's been helpful. I know this is a confusing form. Just about everyone struggles, to be honest, to fill it in. It's a little bit confusing. But hopefully today's webinar has helped you and will be useful. So appreciate your participation, and thank you to Sylvie for setting it all up and hosting our questions and coordinating our questions. Thank you very much to everyone. And with that, we'll close. If you have further questions, as I say, send them to us by email, or we can arrange a one-on-one session with you. Good.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon, evening. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
No problem.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.